The question of God's existence invokes a long controversy, but in the proper light of science, anyone can see the truth. Part 3 brings more incredible proofs from the natural world. While supposed experts claim all life gradually evolved after the Big Bang, you will see additional powerful evidence that everything around us could never be the product of cosmic accident, nor could it have evolved. Many examples reflect God's creative genius. They bear astonishing testimony to divine creation. Each of these miracles of engineering defies atheists and evolutionists. As you see some longer quotes, think carefully about the examples involved. Ask if even one could have evolved. First is the human eye. This amazing mechanism is spectacularly complex and an inspiring testimony to God's supreme intelligence. 3 statements from one source represent the magnitude of difficulty in the human eye evolving to its extraordinary complexity. The most amazing component of the eye, as a camera, is its film or retina. This light-sensitive layer, which lines the back of the eyeball, is thinner than a sheet of saran wrap and is vastly more sensitive to a wider range of light than any man-made film. The best man-made film can handle a range of 1,000 to 1 in sensitivity. By comparison, the human retina can handle the dynamic range of light of 10 billion to 1 or 10 million times more, and can sense as little as a single photon of light in the dark. In bright daylight, the retina bleaches out and turns its volume control way down so as not to overload. The light-sensitive cells of the retina are like an extremely complex high-gain amplifier. There are over 10 million such cells in the retina, and they are packed together with a density of 200,000 per millimeter in the highly sensitive fovea. These photoreceptor cells have a very high rate of metabolism and must completely replace themselves about every 7 days. If you look at a very bright light such as the sun, they immediately burn out, but are rapidly replaced in most cases. Because the retina is thinner than the wavelength of visible light, it is totally transparent. Each of these minute photoreceptor cells is vastly more complex than the most sophisticated man-made computer. Evolutionary biologist Dr. Ernst Mayr, considered the Darwin of the 20th century, once said, "It is a considerable strain on one's credulity to assume that finely balanced systems, such as certain sense organs, the eye of vertebrates or the bird's feather, could be improved by random mutations." Charles Darwin said the very thought of the eye's complexity gave him chills. Here is why. It has been estimated that 10 billion calculations occur every second in the retina before the light image even gets to the brain. It is sobering to compare this performance to the most powerful man-made computer. In an article published in the computer magazine Byte, Dr. John Stevens said, "To simulate 10 milliseconds of the complete processing of even a single nerve cell from the retina would require the solution of about 500 simultaneous nonlinear differential equations 100 times, and would take at least several minutes of processing time on a Cray supercomputer." Keeping in mind that there are 10 million or more such cells interacting with each other in complex ways, it would take a minimum of 100 years of Cray time to simulate what takes place in your eye many times every second. Modern computers would only barely improve this. Now this from an article, "Does the Human Eye Prove that God Exists?" In very basic form, the eye is thought to have first developed in animals about 550 million years ago. But such is its perfect design, its infinite adaptability, and irreducible complexity that many argue it is proof of the divine itself. In Origin of Species, Darwin remarked that the whole idea of something so flawless could have been formed by natural selection seems, I freely confess, he said, absurd in the highest degree. The eye has become a focal point for biologists, ophthalmologists, physicists, and many other branches of science ever since. So when a Spanish neuroscientist made the first anatomical diagrams of neurons in the retina in 1900, it stoked a century of biologists attempting to unlock the eye's secrets. There have been several discoveries. Unlike our ears and nose, for example, which never stop growing our entire lives, our eyes remain the same size from birth. Then there's the complicated process of irrigation, lubrication, cleaning, and protection that happens every time we blink, an average of 4.2 million times a year. There are other astonishing inbuilt systems too. For example, a little trick called the vestibulo-ocular reflex, VOR. In short, it's our own personal Steadicam, an inbuilt muscular response that stabilizes everything we see by making tiny, imperceptible eye movements in the opposite direction to where our head is moving. Without VOR, any attempts at walking, running, even the minuscule head tremors you make while you read these words would make our vision blurred, scattered, and impossible to comprehend. A huge amount is known about optics and the muscles around the eyes, says Claire O'Connell, an MIT fellow. But the retina is the great unknown territory. It's one of the most complex tissues in the human body. You are left to draw your own conclusions about how such a marvelous organism could have evolved. No wonder my optometrist told me he believes the eye did not evolve. He knew it could not, but rather was invented by the greatest inventor. After thousands of years, scientists only recently discovered the reason for eyelashes. But notice the uncertain terms they still use. Surprisingly, the real reason eyelashes evolved has remained unknown. Research shows that those who lack lashes, which some do, suffer higher than average rates of eye infection. That suggests they have some sort of protective function. But exactly what this is and how it works has been a mystery. Some people hypothesize that lashes protect eyes from falling dust. Others think that they act rather like an animal's whiskers, detecting foreign bodies before they can do harm and triggering a protective blink. David Hugh of the Georgia Institute of Technology and his colleagues think they have cracked the problem. Eyelashes do not protect eyes directly. Rather, they change the flow of air around the eye in ways that stop dust and other irritants getting in and moisture getting out. The next excerpt shows God's genius in thinking through each detail. The crucial observation that led Dr. Hugh to this conclusion was that no matter what species of mammal he examined, and he studied 22, the length of its lashes was on average a third of the width of its eye. Scientists conducted an experiment to test their theory and discovered nature has, it turns out, arrived at the optimum eyelash length to keep the cornea moist and dust-free. Of course, no mention of God, just nature did this. By reducing airflow over the cornea, eyelashes create a boundary layer of slow-moving air. That stops dust getting through and also promotes water retention since moisture is not blown away. Up to a point, the boundary layer grows thicker as the lashes grow longer. But long lashes also act as a funnel, channeling moving air into the eye and disrupting the protective layer. The thickest boundary layer comes when there is a 1-to-3 ratio between lash length and eye width. Their main job, if Dr. Hugh is right, is to be a windbreak. Next comes a tiny, little-known creature, the Australian termite. This particular termite differs from all others. In fact, it's 4 creatures in one. Each depends on the others for continued existence, where you cannot have one without all the others. Let's see. A curiosity I studied in microbiology class was a microorganism called Mixotricha paradoxa that lives in the gut of Australian termites. When it was first discovered, it looked as if it was covered with a bunch of curly hairs. Looking closer, it was revealed that these were not hairs at all, but spirochetes, a totally different type of microorganism. On the Mixotricha, there were bumps or appendages where the spirochetes attached, and bacillus which lodged on the other side of the bump. The spirochetes provide a means of locomotion for the entire colony of microorganisms. They are three totally different germs that decided to live together in a community. So, what you have is an interdependence between a large microorganism, a spirochete, a bacillus, an Australian termite, and even the trees the termites feed upon. I suppose if you're an evolutionist, you would have to believe that at one point in time they formed a committee and decided to all work together. The Mixotricha developing bumps where the spirochetes could burrow their heads and behind which the bacillus could hide, all of whom decided to live in the gut of a termite. Interdependence and ecology are problems for evolutionists. These principles demonstrate there are delicate balances between all of the different species on the earth, and that each is dependent on the other. Which evolved first, a species or the food it feeds upon? And to think creationists are always depicted as having blind faith and illogic. So obviously, this proves special creation of all four creatures at the same time. They could not have developed separately and survived to eventually rendezvous for interdependent existence. Next comes the unique relationship between koala bears and eucalyptus trees. Both are only native to Australia. Koalas eat nothing but eucalyptus leaves, often living their entire lives in one grove. They also derive moisture from these leaves because they almost never drink water. Koalas possess specific microorganisms in their digestive systems required to break down elements in eucalyptus leaves that are toxic to all other creatures. These toxins actually convert into vitamins. How did koalas evolve unless they were created with these microorganisms already present in their stomachs? Otherwise, they would have eaten the leaves and died. Yet their systems are so specific, they can only survive on these leaves. Naturalists consider them to have the most advanced digestive system on Earth. A low 5% protein intake, plus tannins and toxins, would kill other animals. Sadly, rejecting creation by God, evolutionists must conclude, what luck for koalas that just the right microorganisms entered their system at the exact same time they developed a taste for only eucalyptus leaves. No, this proves God created koalas. God rejecting evolutionists have no excuse for disbelief. The next amazing quote demonstrates the impossibility of whales and dolphins evolving. It lies in context with a larger statement about why there is no fossil record showing what would have to be almost endless transitions of development. We can demonstrate one such transition problem by using the example of dolphins and whales. These mammals bear their young alive and breathe air, yet spend their entire lifetime in the sea. Presumably, in order for dolphins and whales to have evolved, they must have originated from a land mammal that returned to the water and changed into a sea creature. But dolphins and whales have so many remarkable features upon which their survival depends that they couldn't have evolved. It would be a lot like trying to change a bus into a submarine, one part at a time, all while it is traveling at 60 miles per hour. The following is a list of transitions evolutionists have to account for in the dolphin in its evolution from some unknown land-dwelling pre-dolphin. 1. The nose would have to move to the back of the head. 2. Feet, claws, and tail would be exchanged for fins and flippers. 3. It would have to develop a torpedo-shaped body for efficient swimming in the water. 4. It would have to be able to drink seawater and desalinize it. 5. Its entire bone structure and metabolism would have to be rearranged. 6. It would need to develop a sophisticated sonar system to search for food. Could the dolphin acquire these features gradually, one at a time, over millions of years? What about the transitional stages? Would they have survived with just some of these features? Why is there a total absence of transitional forms fossilized? Consider the whale and its enormous size in comparison with the plankton it feeds upon. The whale is a nautical vacuum cleaner with a baleen filter. While it was developing this feature, what did it feed upon before? For me, it takes a great stretch of the imagination to picture the evolution of dolphins and whales. End of quote. It must be concluded both were created. Any overview of birds reveals remarkable facts. Nearly every kind builds its nest differently. Courtship behavior, sexual roles, and reproductive activity vary among almost every species. In one bird, females gather food while males tend the eggs. And when did the sexes diverge for birds or any other animal? Even some plants are male and female. How did this happen? Hummingbirds represent true creative genius. They weigh 1/14 of an ounce and, like helicopters, can fly forward, backward, sideways, or hover. Their flight mechanism is incredibly complex, and the quills in their feathers are stronger for their weight than any structure ever designed by man. These quills constantly change shape to adjust for wind and air pressure. The leading vein of their feather functions like a propeller for lift and propulsion. Think, 3/4 of their entire weight are wing muscles. They possess a kind of jet-assisted mechanism for landings and takeoffs. Air flows only one way into their lungs to bring a constant supply of oxygen for strenuous, high-speed flight. They also have retractable landing gear, a migration navigation system, streamlining, camouflage, and an extraordinary respiration system that stores extra air inside their hollow bones. This also provides buoyancy and an internal air conditioner. Hummingbirds must eat continually to satisfy their high metabolism. Stopping would mean death. Only through a kind of hibernation at night can they survive. Could all of this have evolved or just happened? Like bumblebees, which also appear to completely defy the laws of physics in flying ability, the hummingbird is just as unique but even closer to aerodynamic perfection. Only God could have made such an efficient flying machine. No aeronautical engineer has ever designed anything close to this tiny marvel of flight. The anglerfish, archerfish, and anableps all literally swim in the face of evolution. The female angler has a lure hanging from an appendage on her nose. It attracts fish so she can strike and swallow them. The male does not have one because he never eats. Rather, he attaches himself to the female, allowing their bloodstreams to merge, thus feeding him. Evolutionists have no explanation for anglerfish. The archerfish can shoot down bugs above the surface by squirting. Water severely bends or refracts light and should cause an impossible targeting problem for the fish. It is score or starve. How do all archerfish instinctively know how to perfectly compute the angle of light refraction to successfully hit prey? God built it in. The anableps has extraordinary eyes. It sits on the surface, seeing out of water and underwater at the same time. Its eyes are divided into two parts. How did evolution cause half an eye to gradually evolve to see out of water and the other half underwater? Ridiculous. What engineer has ever made such efficient submarines whose design makes them perfect hunters, so well suited for their needs and environment? More scientists accept that the overwhelming evidence of design all around us requires a great designer, and acceptance of any other explanation denies reality. The first quote sets up the second. Everyone concludes naturally and comfortably that highly ordered and designed items, machines, houses, etc., owe existence to a designer. It is unnatural to conclude otherwise. But evolution asks us to break stride from what is natural to believe and then believe in that which is unnatural, unreasonable, and unbelievable. The author later writes, "The basis for this departure from what is natural and reasonable to believe is not fact, observation or experience, but rather unreasonable extrapolations from abstract probabilities, mathematics, and philosophy. Now, the second source. In concluding, it is important to realize we are not inferring design from what we do not know, but from what we do know. We are not inferring design to account for a black box, but to account for an open box. A man from a primitive culture who sees an automobile might guess that it was powered by the wind or an antelope hidden under the car. But when he opens the hood and sees the engine, he immediately realizes it was designed. In the same way, biochemistry has opened the cell to examine what makes it run, and we see that it too was designed. It was a shock to people of the 19th century when they discovered, from observations science had made, that many features of the biological world could be ascribed to natural selection. It is a shock to us in the 20th century to discover, from observations science has made, that the fundamental mechanisms of life cannot be ascribed to natural selection and therefore were designed. But we must deal with our shock as best we can and go on. The theory of undirected evolution is already dead, but the work of science continues. End of quote. Remember, true science always harmonizes with the facts, all of them. Believers in God or creation need never fear the facts of science. This author concluded by implying there is directed evolution, often called theistic evolution, meaning God directed the gradual process of all things evolving. Many like to declare, I believe in God, I just think evolution was his method of choice. This introduces a truly great question. The facts of science led two world-famous scientists to see an intelligent designer behind the complexity of the universe. The brilliant Albert Einstein admitted, everyone who is seriously involved in the pursuit of science becomes convinced that some spirit is manifest in the laws of the universe, one that is vastly superior to that of man. In this way, the pursuit of science leads to a religious feeling of a special sort, he said. Dr. Wernher von Braun, the rocket scientist and father of American space program, declared, I find it as difficult to understand a scientist who does not acknowledge the presence of a superior rationality behind the existence of the universe as it is to comprehend a theologian who would deny the advance of science. Of course, again, honest theologians would never deny science. The author of science, God, would certainly not be in conflict with what he authored. Now let's take an imaginary trip to the moon and look back at Earth. Consider all we left behind. Let's ask, what are the mathematical odds that the Earth, with all its plants, animals, ecosystems, and complex interdependence, could come into existence by itself? What are the actual odds all this could happen, that even one Earth could occur? Numerous scientists have recognized the improbable position of our planet's location in the solar system relative to its moon. For instance, if the Earth were 10% farther from the sun, it would freeze over. If 10% closer, it would quickly bake. If 20% closer to the moon, 35 to 50-foot tidal waves would twice a day engulf most of Earth's land surface at great speed. Dr. Hugh Ross sat down and carefully performed an extraordinarily complex mathematical computation. He took 123 separate parameters, realized that today there are over 200, and calculated the odds that all these 123 factors necessary for the Earth to exist as we know it could have come together, just happened on their own. A few must be listed to appreciate the complexity of his calculations. Ross computed an exact value for galaxy size, type, location, birth date of its sun, proximity of solar nebula to a supernova eruption, number of moons, mass and distance from moons, tidal force, axis tilt of planet, distance from star, global distribution of continents, thickness of planet crust, atmospheric transparency, pressure, viscosity, carbon dioxide level, amount of chlorine, cobalt, copper, fluorine, nickel, potassium, and many other elements in the Earth's crust, oxygen to nitrogen ratio, volcanic activity, and 99 more. He then performed one final computation before arriving at a conclusion on the chances of the entire universe producing even one Earth. His calculation for finding all 123 parameters for a single Earth? Less than 1 chance in 10 to the 139th power. 100 million trillion, 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 11 trillions, a lot of zeros, exists that even one such planet would occur anywhere in the universe. End of quote. A vigintillion, for a long time the largest known number, has 63 zeros. But the odds of one Earth anywhere in the universe involves a number so immensely large as to absolutely dwarf a vigintillion. Understand, the universe is inseparable from the laws of mathematics. Any mathematician worth his salt would admit the Earth was created exactly as we see it. So then, the universe was created by God. Let's at least pause to ask, why are people, maybe including you, willing to believe the proof that God created the heavens and the earth as He said, but not willing to believe He created all life on earth, plants and animals, as He said? Make yourself see and come to grips with this inconsistency. Now, don't miss the final 2 parts of this vital series.